Hello, 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 everybody! Welcome to this week's edition of the Designer's Den. I am absolutely thrilled today to have JB Little on, also known as Drop of the Die, as a featured guest today. We're going to talk about some of his products he's done, and how I've forgotten how we first met, apparently, and just other such things where I get straight called out, apparently. But that's cool, because that's my life. You don't have to. I'm here to do that. Anyways, thank you so much for being on today. So why don't you tell all of the viewers a little bit about what you do in the world of tabletop RPGs? One stop shop. I don't know anything about that. hmm We'll see. Mm, can't hear us or can't hear you. Hold on. I hate how this happens sometimes. Let's see. I know, Travis. Hold on. We're resolving it. Okay, talk again.
Check.
Okay.
Toast.
Okay. All right. So tell everyone all over again about how you do everything. And but yes. So um for tabletop RPGs, JB does everything.
Yes. I am a designer, editor, writer, producer, storyboard artist, layout designer, social media advertiser. I do pretty much everything that can be folded into an RPG product. I, right now, actually, for the year 2020, I have been doing primarily writing and layout for other people's products. That's probably why you don't see anything new from me in 2020. Next year, I'm going to be getting back into the swing of managing and producing my own content again. So that's going to be pretty interesting. A
Oh,
lot of people know me because I do giveaways all the time. I give away all kinds of stuff.
giveaways all the time, all kinds of stuff. Do you want to do one of those giveaways right now?
Yes, you can actually just post the link, and whoever stumbles in here can get a free copy of the PDF we're going to talk about today.
Okay. The
I sent it to
link.
you over on Twitter.
Alrighty, I'm gonna find the link on the Twitter. Um, shoot. So the problem with the link on the Twitter is that it truncates it. So send it to me in the Zoom chat real quick, and then I'll post it.
Got you.
But yeah, so definitely a bit of a one-man stop for everything. I know I've seen your design work. I've seen some things that you've edited. I see your Twitter promotion all the time with those sweet, sweet giveaways.
Uh, it's it's mainly been my focus, like from the very beginning, when I was growing the platform and Drop the Die as a brand. I reached out to a couple of companies and I wanted to do product reviews. Actually, it was the first thing that I ever did for tabletop.
Mhm.
I didn't know what metal dice to buy. So I was like, if I don't know and can't find good videos and good reviews, maybe other people don't know either, and I can write a review. So I reached out to some companies, and Norse Foundry and Easy Roller Dice, both in the early days, were like, sure, we'll give you a shot. And ever since, I've been paying it forward. I've been paying it back as much as possible, doing dice giveaways and PDF giveaways, just anything that I can get my hands on and give to people. My little grubby mitts hand them over like some kind of raccoon.
My little grubby little paws, like a fox.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, no, I mean that's actually a pretty interesting way to have gotten kind of started in this. most people that I know, we talk to them or I talk to them, and we got started in this completely on accident.
Well, as far as writing and producing content like PDFs and things like that, uh, that did come kind of by accident. My players in my home campaign at the time had 2 bags of holding, and they were keeping them on legal pad sheets, just kind of all the
Mm-hmm.
inventory written out. And it was like page after page after page of just stuff. So whenever they were looking for something, they'd have to compare notes and flip back and forth through everything. So I made a PDF that like was form fillable, and you could write in all the things you needed, or you could print it out and just write it in yourself
Ooh.
with little boxes and all the rules for the bag of holding. And I put that on DM's Guild since I had already made it for my players, and it kind of blew up. People seemed to really like it, and that started the snowball that had a whole bunch of people kind of interested in what else I could make.
Mm-hmm. And that kind of is how it is sometimes. So, one of the things that you made, and that we've got the link there in the chat that people can go ahead and grab for free if they want, is called Taverns, Inns, and Tap Rooms. And it's a pretty cool little supplement. I think this came out around the time that Waterdeep Dragon Heist was coming out, right?
I believe so, yes. A little after, I think, because I
Yeah.
did do a PDF for Dragon Heist for the deed for the house that you can get in that
Oh, the
adventure.
Troll Skull Manor. Yep, so this
Mhm.
is August 6th, 2019. So yeah, right around that time. Taverns and inns were hot right then. And I mean you
Completely by accident.
you know that better than anybody because this particular supplement shot to gold like what was it, like 2, 3, 4 days? 5?
uh, I think so.
You know
I
what?
know that
It's
I
on
hit copper in like 5 minutes,
it's
and it
on
freaked me
it's
out,
on
and
the
I didn't know
page.
what had happened.
It's gold bestseller in
4 days.
4 days. Yeah, I was like, I know I just read it. Yeah, so for anyone not familiar with the DM's Guild medal systems, copper means you've sold 51 copies, and then silver is 101, electrum is 251, and gold is 500 copies. Um, and this is a product priced at $9.95, which is actually a good bit higher than most of the stuff on the DM's Guild, at least at that time, especially. Prices have been creeping up, which I know I personally think is appropriate because the level of, I guess, detail and effort and all of that put into stuff has just been creeping on up there. But
In the very early days, like when I released the first PDF that I ever put up there, the stuff looked like, second edition. It was black and white. There were 2 pictures and a 40-page thing.
it came
And
right
now
out of
it's,
Word. Sometimes people put up
ooh,
Word documents.
exactly. And now people have like whole production teams, and they're putting hundreds or if not thousands in some cases of dollars into the production of one supplement. So yeah, to kind of keep up with things, you have to escalate that price. Especially, a lot of people don't know the creator only makes half of what it costs when you buy it on the DM's Guild. And the rest is for, licensing, royalties, hosting fees, stuff like that.
Hmm.
So, and then royalty splits from that. Sometimes you just need that $9.95 or that $10.
Oh, I certainly do know. I've got some things where I get like a whopping 1.93% of each sale, and I'm like,
It only needs to sell 1 million copies, and you'll have made your effort back. Yeah, I have
oh,
several of those out there.
you know, just throw a bunch of stuff out there. So Taverns, Inns, and Tap Rooms is probably one of your best-selling products, and it is, as you described it, a one-stop gastronomic and relaxation resource for DMs and players. 9 unique location agnostic businesses offering a different suite of services, amenities, NPCs, food, lodging, and drinks for your 5th edition D&D campaign. So, one thing that I really like about this as someone who is what is known as a lazy DM is that you have a bunch of like charts, tables, to make it really easy to just open this up real quick and be like, oh, okay, so what is this inn serving? I don't know. I'm not a cook. I don't know what people serve at inns. Looks like for dinner we're having roasted hens and is that on here? I'm gonna laugh.
No, there's
Okay.
more than likely roasted hens everywhere. That was one of the early things that I wanted to do. I wanted to make locations, obviously, but the entire production of the PDF, when I started it, I wanted to see how much effort it took to make a place
Mm-hmm.
and make it fully formed in my mind what I would need in my game, and figure out where the most difficult places were, the hiccups for designing that place. And then in the last chapter of the book, I wanted to put charts to make that easier for people to do themselves. So whenever I was, struggling with a place and I would think, God, I don't know, like the theme, I don't know what kind of people come here. And then I'd have to think about it and kind of work out a way to make it make sense. I just put it in a chart. You roll, and oh, most of the people that come here are neutral. Well, who runs it? So, like, you can have an evil bastard running the place with neutral people that come because there's nowhere else to shop.
Mm-hmm.
Like, as you kind of go down the line and you start filling in those little details, those subtle details, it brings about a story for the place, like as you actually roll on the charts. And that's kind of how I made the originals, is I had all these little notes and I would pick which ones fit best until it told me a story, and then that's how I would make the location.
No, I think that's pretty good design philosophy. You start with a little nugget and then you just kind of build on it.
That's kind of been my whole way of approaching making stuff. I don't want to spell things out too completely. I always feel like that makes people feel claustrophobic almost. They tend to like more open, airy stuff, ideas to inspire them, and then they
Mm-hmm.
can fill in all the gaps. When I started this, also, some of my friends that I was talking to about it, because I would go to them for their input on these places, like, is this somewhere you would like to go? Because I don't drink and I don't go to bars and I don't go to pubs or anywhere else like that. I hardly ever travel. So
Well,
all I
nobody
really
travels
knew,
now, so.
well, now, yeah. But, it was all these little things I had no clue about. So I was learning it as I was learning to make the place. And I was trying to see how it was different, back 200 years ago, 300 years ago, looking at how it's kind of evolved.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea that stuck with me the most was that these places had catered to people so much already. Like, even way back in the day, they had these cool amenities and these interesting things
Mm-hmm.
going on. Like, they would procure local meats and vegetables for better dishes for higher paying customers, that kind of thing. And other places would just have a room, and people would find their little spot in that room and sleep, or they would get the hell out and not come back. So, like, you had these huge variations in how much a place would cater to keep your business back in the day. And that's less true now, but we do still have motels and seedy places.
Well, so yeah, so if you're going back to like some medieval history, which was actually one of my favorite subjects, I mean, it's very much true. So most of your run of the mill, side of the road, like tavern and inn, um, it's gonna have you're gonna have some stew. What's in the stew? I don't know. But you come in, dressed nicely and everything, lord or lady. Oh, they're gonna go find someone who has some chickens, um, because the lord or lady's gonna pay for it. So they're gonna get this chicken for a steal and then make a killing on it. They'll bring out the local mead, whatever the nice thing is, whatever wine, whatever it may be, and actual place settings, which most people didn't get that. You get like a
Most
stone.
had like a
Yeah,
wooden bowl.
you got like you
Yeah.
got you got like a wooden bowl or like a wooden slab, and they just here's your plank of wood with your food on it. And you get like a ceramic cup. Don't break it, man.
You break it, you buy it, and you
That
can't afford it if you're staying here.
that is abundantly true. And then yeah, many of them operated much like hostels, in that there was a big common room where everyone lived, shared amenities if there were any amenities, such as the shared privy house, uh, things that you don't want to share.
I even did some reading. I went to JSTOR and looked at some academic papers as well when I was kind of researching how this would happen. Obviously, there's stuff you don't want to put in the game because it can make people uncomfortable. It's not something people want to relive, like the Roman style group toilets, where it's just like one plank of wood and you would sit next to other people to use the toilet. Probably don't need that in this supplement. But the idea of the Roman style inns at the time, a Roman would come and get a room. They would lease a room, is kind of how it translates, right? And the people that ran the place would take care of everything they need in the city. Like if they needed clothes, they go buy them. If they needed, you know, to hire slaves or travelers or a caravan or anything like that, the person wouldn't even leave the inn. They would just send runners to go do all that they needed in the city and bring it to them.
Complete
And then they would leave
concierge
again.
service.
Exactly. So these like one stop, like even if you get a single copper coin from that, it would change people's lives back in ye olde times. And that kind of thing, like it just really seemed so interesting that I couldn't not make it, especially when I found out that there weren't so many supplements dealing with taverns, inns, and tap rooms.
And it's definitely like, as you know, the common trope is all good adventures start in an inn or a tavern, which is often the same thing. Like, okay, a lot of DMs sit there and they're like, all right, you're at a table. There's a barmaid. She brings you drinks, and then y'all go. No, there's so much more possibility there. Like, okay, we're at this table. You can show how much your contact cares about you by what food they're providing you. Like, what level of food and service does this inn offer, and how high has your contact gone? Like, you know, do they really want your help, or are they just like, have some stew?
Here's some rosemary, thyme, and meat pottage. And you're like, ugh.
I'm afraid you mean cabbage stew.
Like, some of the stuff that I was reading about specifically in, I want to say it was in and around France, right?
Oh my goodness,
The peasants
early.
would sometimes, yeah, they'd sometimes be cooking salmon and other kinds of fish like that over a fire, and that sounded great. But then the lords and ladies would just eat expensive stuff cooked together in a pot. And the pottages that they were eating, like, I can't see how they were edible at the time. It would just be like a half pound of parsley and chicken and water, and they would boil it, and then that would be their stew. I'm like, ugh, that sounds so bad.
Early French food needed some refinement. They used the best butter though. They did have butter and cheese then still. So we're gonna throw like a half a bushel of parsley, one whole chicken, and like a pound of butter. It's gonna be fine.
It's got your calories for the day. I guess
Yeah.
they can't ask for much more.
No, and they would just have the bread and cheese to actually taste good.
So, looking at it and researching academic papers and stuff like that, one of the things that I remember spending a lot of time considering was how I could explain what a place is like using as few words as possible.
Mm-hmm.
So I you can tell a lot by a place by the food it serves, right? You go into a hotel and it just has a couple vending machines and like snacks or pre-made muffins. You know what kind of place that is, like as soon as you put your eyes on it. But even if they have like a little waffle machine and little like
Hot breakfast.
self hot breakfast stuff, that tells you a completely different story of what that place is like and where their care is going for the people that come there.
Mhm.
So food, we spent a lot of time and I spent a lot of effort. I even brought on Karina to do menus for me because I felt like food was so central to the care that you would find in these places. And like you said, oh, you're at a tavern, they bring you mead and roast pork. That's great, but it doesn't tell you anything about the tavern you're in, or the people that run it, or the region you're in, or anything like that. But if you have a mulberry spiced wine
Oh, mulberries
and
grow nearby.
yeah, and like onion stuffed Cornish game hen, then you get a bigger detail of this more wide open space. It's probably a little cooler. Like it clues you in so much to the feeling of the environment in which this place is. So that's why I spent a whole lot of time making the menus, including the alcoholic beverages. I have no clue. I brought on people to help me figure out like where I should spend my time in making alcoholic beverages since I don't drink alcohol myself. But it was a great kind of learning experience, learning that like how wine is made, how whiskey is different from bourbon, is different from scotch.
Hmm.
There are small, subtle differences that bringing them into a product that a player can purchase and drink, and a DM knows what it's supposed to taste like. All those little things add up to tell a much broader story than just mead.
That's true, and there are thousands of kinds of even just mead. So, like, a little bit more in depth. Like, are we having like a nice honey mead, like blood orange mead? Like, what part of the world are we in? What are we doing? How are these people feeling? Are we having like a Viking mead? We're about to go on a raid, you know? And I think too, like a lot of the work and the effort that you put into these menus definitely shows. I, of course, did not take a picture of any of these menus to put up, but they're just, you know, stunning works of art, really. You've got each one like laid out with graphics and everything. Taste of fire, morning meal, the midday, the evening, sweets, spirits, and and everything. And some of them have writing so fancy that like I can't read it unless I get real close to the page.
Like I said, Karina, the person that I brought on to help with those, has been a huge support like forever. I feel like Karina's been around on Drop the Die for forever. And when I reached out, like, you do graphic design work, would you like to do the menus?
Mm-hmm.
Karina said, I have thousands of these, and sent me the little page filigrees and the different little like embroidery kind of elements for the pages and menus. I'm like, then I picked the right person.
Yeah.
Thank you. So working with her, like, what should we include for the DM to know what is on the plate, and what should we include on a menu to hand the players to look at? Figuring out exactly what to tell them for each place, I think made those menus such a huge hit because they're not identical. None of them are the same. They tell different amounts of information in a different way, like you were saying. And we happen to be on the same page for Taste of Fire, which is creepy. But
Yeah.
like Taste of Fire is made very straightforward, very easy to read, and you can tell that the clientele there is probably not aristocratic.
I'm
They're probably more working class kind of thing.
actually gonna pop up the lantern light menu so people can see what we're talking about. Just the care and detail that was put into this. It's a 2-page spread. This looks like something you'd find at a restaurant where you don't want to ask them how much stuff costs, because if you have to know, it's gonna ruin your whole night.
I actually, yeah, we actually didn't include the cost on the menu. I think that we chose to do that on purpose, as it's part of the fee for being there.
It's on some of them, but not all of them. But yeah, no, I mean, like, something like that absolutely like tells you a bit about the world. Whatever you're going in, you look at a real fancy menu and you're like, "That's a nice place." So, kind of, gearing away from just the Taverns, Inns, and Tap Rooms, though. So you put a lot of research into this. Is that what you do for all of your design work?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of my shtick, as it were, for the stuff that I make.
Is your Google search history quite questionable?
Yeah.
The best
Like when people
best way to murder a man.
yeah. Uh we were talking earlier about Dragon Heist coming out, and I made a printable deed for Troll Skull Manor. And uh, when I was researching that, I actually pulled up deeds that were written in London and France back in the 1500s and 1600s to figure out how they worded stuff, because it's not the same as today. They would compare the date to the next equinox,
Mm-hmm.
or they would talk about how many months you were in and then how many days. Like the verbiage and how they presented the information was so weird and so complicated. Like for a portion no longer than, like, it made our today kind of leases seem mundane by comparison.
And that's like a property deed. Getting into a land deed, an old timey land deed, like where they're describing like where the property lines are.
Because there was no GPS, there was no, like, you had to have a physical feature and then describe backwards from that feature. It was insane. And going through it, the one that I ended up using the most and brought the most from was actually a deed that I had translated from French to English so that I could figure out exactly what was said. And so, I hired someone to help me translate it, because you can't trust Google Translate on that sort of thing.
Oh no, no.
And Sitlali didn't want any credit or anything, but she did great helping me understand, like, how a word could be interpreted in two ways for
Mm-hmm.
like a legal document. So using two different words in ambiguous language when I'm writing the deed, that was super fun. And it only took me like a weekend to do it, but also I have this long history being an English major and having a lot of time in literary science and things like that in my undergrad. I know how to look that up and apply it quickly. And a lot of people don't. And so that's kind of the only thing that I feel I can offer in a very direct fashion, is to do that kind of research. Taverns, Inns, and Tap Rooms in Hell, I pulled stuff from Dante's Inferno to try and flesh out what hell would look like and the kinds of things that would feel like salvation in such a bleak and terrible place. Little things like that that I hope translates into a better final product than if I had just brought it all off the dome or pulled it from the D&D wiki and gave it to people. So yeah, I try to do that as often as possible.
The D&D wiki is a questionable source at best. As someone who has also done a lot of academic research, I would not cite the D&D wiki for it. Oh my goodness. Yeah, no, I'm actually in the middle of academic research now, doing my MBA, and I'm like, wow. Yeah. Because there are so many things on the internet to where it's just. But I think doing the historical research and going back and doing the due diligence, it does add a lot of character to products that people wouldn't otherwise necessarily get, because a lot of people doing this work nowadays, a lot of content creators that are newer into the scene, like, they don't have that kind of background. I know offhand, like, I can think of like 4 or 5 like rising stars who were like, went to med school, worked in woodworking, worked at, as a marketing guy at a clothing shop.
I've seen a lot of business and marketing people
Yeah,
getting into
and like
tabletop.
and like they have knowledge. They have vast knowledge, but like these aren't people who studied like classic literature, lots and lots of history or anything like that. And so they can bring all sorts of stuff to it, especially like a lot of them bring excellent pop culture references that they sneak in there. But like being able to have that, I guess, classical history and literature background, um, definitely kind of harkens back to some of the, I guess, the roots of fiction and writing and everything, like drawing it all back in and closing the circle.
You also have to walk that line where you want to be allegorical and you want to pull from things. But like I can't directly quote Jane Eyre and expect D&D nerds to universally get it. So you have to kind of pick and choose where you want to pull information and research from. And like we were saying, you and I could talk about the horrifically terrible food that people ate back in the old days forever. But
I didn't
you
even
also
need
have
to
to
take medieval history. I just wanted to.
same. I didn't need to take Roman history at all.
I
It was
took
just
I
annoying.
took both courses of it, and I didn't even need another elective in social sciences or whatever it was. I just took.
So you have to constantly judge where you want to draw the line for escapism for people.
Mm-hmm.
And figuring out where that line is denotes what kind of product you're making. Because there are a lot of people and a lot of really great things put on the DMs Guild that are ultra high fantasy. And I have almost no use for it myself. I can't pull a lot of inspiration from that personally, but I know a huge swath of people that do. They love that pulpy, really high action, intense, high fantasy setting. And I've known people on the DMs Guild that make stuff in like uncomfortably low fantasy where they have people dying of cholera and like all this normal
Okay,
terrible stuff.
dysentery is a terrible way to go. Let me tell you. Okay, so
And it is
very realistic,
everywhere.
very realistic. Stabbed him through the gut with a sword. That's how he died? No, 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 no. Worse.
My father died from a bad potato. And
Worse. It was dysentery. The crops were bad this year.
so figuring out where that lens is going to fall tells a lot about the kind of product that you want to make and how you want people to interact with
Yeah, I think that's definitely an interesting take on it because as someone who has like, oh, your camera's gone black.
it. It did.
Well, you'll be back in a second. But as someone who's got like that history and everything, you have to think like just like someone who's like a lore guru who knows all the Forgotten Realms lore. Just because you know it, how your battery's exhausted.
Yeah.
Oh,
For some reason the battery died. We're gonna swap to the terrible cam.
oh no. Wow, this is a new
It
one.
was it was because I was sitting so long in the Google Meets. I forgot to swap the battery out before I joined the Zoom call.
That's okay. I I don't have a camera that has a battery. Just plugs in.
The connector that I'm supposed to like, you slide it in the battery pack for this digital DSLR, whatever,
Oh, you
and you're
fancy.
supposed to plug it in. It hasn't come in yet. The camera itself got here, and I got too excited and I couldn't wait.
Okay. All right. Yeah, yeah. No, mine's still just a webcam. I didn't go to DSLR yet, but it's a 4K webcam. So
It looks great.
thank you, thank you. You can see if I have a pimple, you can see all of them. I don't right now though. It's not that time of month. No. But yeah. So you have to be careful though, like how much lore, how much history you pull in, because a lot of people just can't relate to that. They don't know it. And so how do you decide, what's too much?
I think kind of planting your flag at where your comfort level is. Like, there's a reason that people say everyone should write the story that they want to write, even if it's already done. Like, even if there's already a Harry Potter out there, you can write a wizard novel. It's because you're never going to be exactly the same as the next person. There's always going to be a twist in how you tell things and what you do. And I feel that I've established a place that I'm comfortable with in terms of bringing in old history and creating new fiction and that sort of thing. That when people stumble onto my products, they know that's the line I'm going to be walking. Those are the kinds of things I'm going to be making in pretty much everything I do. So if they're comfortable there, they know that my next product's probably going to fit that same kind of niche and hit that same mark.
Okay, so you're kind of going then a little bit for the history buffs. It's kind of what
Yes.
you're aiming for. And
If I had to give it like a percentage mix, I would say like 70-30. I like history and then the fantasy to be like
yeah.
highlight points and like the trappings of this fantastical world around normal trade agreements and stuff like that. That kind of thing always tickles me and makes me very happy.
Well, trade agreements are very important even in the Forgotten Realms. The nation of would definitely agree with that statement as a
Right.
mercantile nation. Um, and the nation of Fae as a nation who deals in they trade stuff,
Hmm.
things, people. They trade people.
And when I was talking about the D&D wiki, that's kind of why that's still a good resource. Not for anything class related. The Forgotten Realms wiki is useful. Quote, D&D wiki is not somewhere you should ever go and stay for any length of time
It's
because
it's an
there's
it's an entertaining read.
there's 30 years of already pre-established written history in the Forgotten Realms from
More.
authors and publishers, game designers, all kinds of stuff. So having that kind of one-stop shop repository for that information is very helpful because you can know that there are direct history correlations between somewhere like Thay and Carthage, for instance. They have some similar kind of beats to them. So if Thay inspires you, you can look up stuff for Carthage or Persia and stuff like that. You can know where to aim in our own history.
Yeah, like Kalimshan. Going back to something that I was writing in Dreams of the Red Wizard. So I was like, what did I look up Kalimshan for? And it's and Termish. Like you got to figure out like what those relate to. What would an open air market in a nation like that look like? So Termish, kind of Turkey, Syria area, like an open air market over there is going to be way different than an open air market in the U.S. Like it's not nearly the same. People are having like stalls just jammed together, fabric coverings to protect from the sun, lots of haggling, bright colors, loud noises, and generally they put these markets as near to some body of water as they can to try and get those fresh breezes. Now it's not always possible because Turkey and Syria aren't entirely, they're not islands, they're not surrounded by water. So
Mhm.
but those are things that you kind of take into account when you're trying to build out a world and like you're doing a city in Termish. Did you just flip 180 on me? Oh,
No, I
oh,
swapped cameras.
oh.
I put in a different battery while we were talking.
um, but yeah, so definitely like being able to do that corollary between the two. So, other than like historical and I guess classic literature, what else do you kind of lean on when you're doing your design process? What so you start with an idea and then where do you get your ideas?
So if there are any movie buffs out there, they probably know some of the best movies that have ever been written come from a very small idea,
Mhm.
like Alien, for instance. There's an alien on a spaceship,
That was the
and
idea.
that's it. That's the idea. It's how they did that idea that made it so interesting. It wasn't there's an alien, but then there's another bigger alien that comes, and the first alien wants, it starts to kind of devolve and fall apart because it's hard to spin those yarns and keep people invested when the central premise is kind of lost in all of the noise of you making it. So, for instance, for Taverns and Tap Rooms, I was like, I want to do 3 inns, 3 tap rooms, and 3 taverns, and figure out a way to make them different. And that was kind of it. That's the only idea that I had for that. So going into each one, I wanted to start with a central little seed idea something that would set it apart from the rest of them, something to make it tell its own story. And each one of them had their own theme aside from anything else. Lantern Light is an inn that I made that is extremely grandiose, very,
Yeah.
very expensive, all encompassing. It does everything. I wanted it to be this huge place that would blow people's minds. And
Five-star hotel.
the only idea I had was paper lanterns, because that just seemed like the most lavish, annoyingly expensive thing that a place could do.
I mean,
Releasing
it really is, because like
releasing handcrafted paper lanterns every night, like, you know, they've got some extra cash if they're doing
that's
something that
precious
bombastic.
resources right there, because you've got the candle, you've got the paper, you've got whatever wire structure to make the lantern. Like, I mean, back when resources were scarce to make all of that, like that adds up.
Exactly. And
And they
if you were a commoner, right, and you're out plowing a field or something, and you see these paper lanterns coming on the sky, you know, they look like stars floating over and landing in your field, and you blow it out and you have a little candle and a little coin, and you can go and get food at this place that seems like some mountain to the gods. Like, I wanted it all to feel too big to be true,
Oh,
but
so the paper
make it
lanterns looking
realistic.
like stars reminds me of Tangled.
Right? And that's a great scene because it makes you want to cry.
She paints the stars on her birthday, and I'm like,
So,
they're magical.
paper lantern was the only idea for that.
Okay.
And Taste of Fire, I had my roommate at the time, Phoenix, involved. I was like, hey, I'm making a place and I want all the food to be spicy. That was my only seed ideas, super spicy food.
Mm-hmm.
And we love super spicy food. And she has part of her family is Japanese and part of her family is Hispanic. And it's this fantastic cultural blend whenever I interact with her family, because there's all these cool cultural elements there. I'm like, what would you like if this was your place? And she told me she wanted it to be made of really nice wood and have a lot of really cool, comfortable things inside it. And that's just kind of how that evolved. So I guess it's equal parts starting with a small seed idea and involving as many other voices as I can to figure out how to tell that in a different way than I would normally do it. If I ever do a Taverns, Inns, and Tap Rooms Volume 2, that's what I would want, is to bring on, like you were saying, I want to bring on people from Turkey and people from Iran and all around the world, and give some really cool places with cultural touchstones for them to make locations that feel completely different from something I could just cook off the top of my head.
Okay. Yeah, no, that makes sense. Like, I, I'll say, like, even just since I've moved to Chicago, I've learned like so much about different foods, because there's so many different people here than there were in Tennessee. Like, you just don't get that experience if you can't live it. And I've been absolutely delighted with every new discovery. So, you know, it would add more. Like, I wouldn't want a cookbook that only has recipes I know. That's boring.
Yeah.
And so I don't want, you know, I don't want a book about taverns and inns, and, you know, where it's just like, oh, this is pretty much a place I've been. So you still want to add that, you know, that it's you know, it's something else. It's something kind of another world. But it's also still kind of believable.
So when I lived in Mississippi before I moved out here to Las Vegas, I grew up in northern Mississippi near Tennessee. We were only a like 2 hour drive from Memphis, I think. We live right next to the. Why are you giving me that look?
I'm trying to decide where he lived.
Oh, I lived near Columbus, Mississippi. I don't hide that sort of thing.
No, I was just,
But
I was like, what's 2 hours from Memphis?
yeah, we lived near Tupelo,
I
actually,
know where
near
that is.
Elvis and all that. Yeah. So I
I
lived up there, and then I moved to Hattiesburg,
I know where that is.
which is pretty far south in Mississippi. And even the differences in the same state, north to south, were huge. The kind of people, the number of people, the types of restaurants, the types of favorite food, that kind of stuff. It did change going north to south Mississippi. So the idea that it would be the same across all of the D&D multiverse, that's very
I
problematic.
mean, it definitely would not. Like, Tennessee is even three separate, distinct regions: East, West, Middle Tennessee. They're not the same. They all do like fried chicken though, and barbecue, but they each have their own spin on it, right?
Hmm.
Like at this point in time, everyone's pretty much heard of Nashville hot chicken, and like that's a Nashville thing. Like, no one came up with that in like Memphis. It wasn't a thing there until like it was a thing in Nashville, and then all of a sudden everybody's like, yeah, that's great. It's a good idea. We're gonna take it from this culture and we're gonna have it everywhere now because we like it too. And I think food is like an important language.
It is. I have this conversation a lot with creatives on Twitter specifically, especially like my friend Justice and Justice Arman and I
Okay,
talk about food a lot and how it kind of
I think
plays this.
Justice has been going through the cookbook, right? Heroes Feast.
I think so recently.
Yeah.
I barely see Justice's posts anymore.
Which
Twitter algo hates us. Uh, but
Justice hasn't posted as much as he used to.
but the idea that like what kind of trail rations someone has changes the adventure because that little thing matters. And it mattered a lot in Lord of the Rings. People talk about lambus bread and how hobbits eat 3 or 4 meals a day. Like they talk about that stuff all the time. And it should be present, I believe, in a lot of fantasy fiction. Just touchstones. You don't need to spend as much time as George R. Martin, where you're talking about juice and beards and rashers of foaming. You don't need all that. But
The pigeon
knowing,
pie.
oh my god, I could not read those books.
They're
Anyway,
so good.
okay. Anyway, like giving that touchstone, everyone knows food in some capacity. And the people who don't care about food, and I have met several who say they eat to live, they do not care what it is or what it tastes like. I think they're aliens, but it doesn't matter. So if they don't interact with the food portion of the narrative that you're spinning, it takes no time away. You tell them what kind of food is available, and if they don't care, you move on. It's no big deal at all. So I think that it has a great position to be present in Dungeons and Dragons specifically and other fantasy tabletop games, just to give those cultural touchstones and those things to anchor them into the real world.
And theoretically, it's pretty easy to anchor, like Forgotten Realms especially, into the real world because most of the regions are analogs of real places. That's what Ed kind of wrote them as. Like he imagined, you know, Icewind Dale, for instance, where the current season is kind of an analog of like uh, North America and the native peoples. So the First Nations of Canada, um, and the Native Americans in the U.S. And so like there's cultures and everything tied into all of these regions, and if you can just like kind of step back, like there's a lot of history that you can draw from real world, even not just the mountains of realms lore. Oh, it gets overwhelming easily.
So I think that that is probably the biggest part of my design philosophy is trying to establish how things interact with the history of a location. Be that like you were saying, Icewind Dale based on like Alaskan folklore. There's some stuff in there, Native American folklore and things like that. Pulling from that to make a product has always been the thing that I love the most, far more than just making something someone wants to buy.
Yeah, and I think that's definitely. I mean, you have, like you said, you have to write the thing that you want to write. If you're not invested and you're not passionate about your project, like it becomes a chore. So, writing about the history of something that's kind of already established is easy. What do you do when you're creating your own worlds, your own campaigns?
Generally, what I'll do when I'm trying to cook up an idea for an adventure or a world book or something like that, as I've already said, pull from history, find things that work in history and entice you and give you a springboard to operate off of. It's very important. But I do borrow heavily from the media that I ingest. I enjoy a specific kind of narrative, a specific kind of book, TV show, movie. I can like a wide variety of things, obviously, but like the little character dramas matter more to me than doomsday plots, for instance. And when I write an adventure, I want every single person involved, every player and their character, to want to play it. I want them to understand the narrative and see the signpost they're going towards from the beginning, right?
So to be
And
completely engaged in whatever the storyline is.
yes, the small premise, they know what it is they're doing and they go to do it.
Okay.
And dealing with the fallout thereafter is kind of the adventure itself. Uh, I was brought on as a narrative consultant for someone writing an adventure. And I can't get into the specifics of the adventure, but the overview is my response after I read it was, what are they doing? Like, what's their goal
Mm-hmm.
from first page to last page? And the author didn't really know. It just kind of meandered until they got to the end. And you can see that in some of the early fifth edition stuff and some of the fourth edition stuff. Even big companies like Wizards of the Coast, it's kind of hard to give a 20 level or a 15 level adventure and stay on task with a central strong narrative. So when I'm doing it, I want there to be that one central thread. I want them to see the destination they're going to from the outset and know
Yeah.
that they're getting closer.
Like Tyranny of Dragons definitely had some what are we doing now?
Yeah. It's like the set piece design, like point A to point B, point B to point C, point C to point D. It works, especially for like a serialized every week we play and we're following the clues kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But like a story like Supernatural, for instance, it goes for
Oh,
15 years and they go freaking everywhere,
I
right?
don't even
All over
know
the
what they're
place,
doing anymore. Like,
right?
I don't even know if they know what they're doing.
And it works because you like the characters. But if you were playing Sam and Dean and you had no freaking clue what you were doing other
I would
than
have quit
existing,
a while back.
it would get very tiring. You wouldn't have an idea or a goal in mind. Your character would be like, why am I risking my life every single week other than to find dad, other than to save you?
Other than because I'm the chosen one. But do I have to be? Why can't Voldemort have chosen someone else?
The Chosen One stories and I do not get along very well. I think that most people that know me probably are keyed into that one already. But I like a narrative. Matt Colville, for instance,
Mm-hmm.
is on one end of a spectrum. He wants his players to show up and interact with the world, regardless of who they're playing. The world's going to keep going no matter what, and they have to push their own will onto the world.
You create the story.
Exactly. Matt Mercer is on another side,
I
right?
have the story.
I have a story in mind, and I want your characters to be sewn into it and developed into a narrative that we can tell everybody. Two ends of the bookmark. I'm closer to Matthew Colville, but not quite. I want the players and their characters to matter and have their own story, but the world does not care. The world does not care at all about their stories. It's the party and the players that should care about the character stories.
Mm-hmm. Because
And
in the
so,
scope of the world, they're just 5 people.
yes, even if they're super powerful, they're still just five
There's
people.
probably 5 other equally super powerful people somewhere else.
Exactly.
Uh,
So, like giving them a goal, protect this noble family. I just tweeted about this, but it was an idea I had while I was actually writing a tweet. An iron golem comes and starts killing members of a family. And at level 1, the party members have to collect this noble house and escort them to safety. And eventually, they'll grow in power to stop the iron golem that ceaselessly chases after them, kind of like an It Follows sort of cultural touchstone.
mhm.
This looming threat that feels no tiredness, that has no exhaustion and just keeps chasing you. That's terrifying. And at lower levels, that terror pulls the group together into the narrative. Do you abandon this family and let them die, or do you help them escape and figure out what's going on? Like, if they don't bite and they don't inject themselves into that narrative, if they don't care about the family and the NPCs and they don't want to fight the Iron Golem, okay, go do something else. I don't want to make them have to do it.
Mhm.
And a lot of DMs will turn the Iron Golem threat in this example and be like, it's chasing the party. And now they don't have a choice. You've taken the choice from them to make themselves involved in the narrative. It's either fight it or die. And
It's not a
a
very
lot of the plot points,
fulfilling choice.
yeah. And you see that kind of echoed in even the newer editions for 5th edition, like Rime of the Frost Maidens. Either you do A or bad thing happens. And then that's your narrative. I don't really like that. I like the players to have a choice. And if they're like, I don't want to mess with this, I'm like, I have other products. You can combine with them.
I think that's why engaging all of the pillars of play are important. Like, you don't want to fight it, okay? We can still deal with this without fighting it.
Find out who sent it and see if you can barter a truce.
Get him
See
to
if the
call off his
family knows what's
golem.
going on. Exactly.
Yeah, find out why are they after this family? Did they steal something? Can we just give it back and that solves the problem? With some recompense, probably on top.
Exactly.
But
like even that little seed, you can spin it in so many different directions using the different pillars of play, where it doesn't have to be the world is ending, right? The dragons are destroying the world. The giants are
no,
destroying the world. The elemental princes are destroying the
no,
world.
we gotta do design philosophy more like my mother, who doesn't understand D&D but wants to do this anyways. We're focusing on Simon and Simon's family, and everything kind of revolves around them. And if you want to help them, good. If you don't, Simon's got some business ventures that you can help him with, or some potentially lucrative opportunities, but he'd really like you to help his family.
Exactly. Like giving those anchors and having plenty of hooks to pull the players in, I think is like number one thing that I love to do. It's what I tweet about the most, it's what I think about the most, it's what I write about the most. Even if everything else falls a little flat, your players are going to make that fun anyway. They're going to have fun no matter what you do. If you can give them a nice narrative to follow
Mm-hmm.
or abandon and the choice to do so, they're going to have fun like almost every time. And even if you can't use the narrative that's presented in a product, if there's enough stuff there to use and pull from, it's still worth it. So even if no one wants to use any of the 6 locations I made in taverns and tap rooms, the
You can make
menus,
a new one based on all of that.
there are NPCs, there are magic items, there's alcohol, like there's all this stuff that you won't have to spend time making if you spend the money on it. And
Right.
that's kind of the two-part how I like to design stuff. There's cheap products like the printable deed. If you don't want a printable deed for your, I had a review that was 1 star. Who would buy this? I'm like, well, not you.
No,
That's not
no.
made for you.
Wait,
if you
hold
don't
on.
want it.
If he left a review, then he bought it.
That's what I'm saying. Like, why would you purchase it and say who would need this and then leave a bad review when it says exactly what it is? Little products like that serve a purpose and they have a place, and there are people that want to buy them. But bigger things that you craft for a narrative or structural purpose, they do need to kind of work twofold. They need to give you plenty of ammunition to use in your own world and a base to build off of if you choose to.
Yeah. No, I like that. I like that. Okay. Well, we are just over an hour. So that's gonna kind of wrap up this episode. So do you have any projects that you're working on that you want to share anything about before we go, or you want to tell people where they can find you and your stuff on social media? I've already got some links down in my panels, but I can add anything else.
Right now, I'm not working on any of my own projects. I'm working on projects with other people. You can find a lot of my layout work this year on Action Fiction. I've done 2 projects for them already, and I'm working on a 3rd. You can also find me working on a lot of stuff for Absolute Tabletop with their Mecha Hack and stuff like that. We're actually doing a Mecha Hack game tomorrow night on Fistful of Dice channel.
Ooh.
We've been going for several weeks now. It's teens and Gundams and giant robots and angst, and it's been a lot of fun, and working with them has been pretty fantastic. Just getting to work with different people in general.
Mm-hmm.
I do have one project that is not a product that I'm going to be doing in November and December. Someone was kind enough to purchase 15 narrative consulting hours from me to be given to the tabletop community.
Aww.
So I'm actually going to be making a forum or a form that you can sign up with and bring me on to help redesign, fill any holes, help restructure a project that you're working on, be it written or live stream or anything like that. I've already done 6 or 7, and they've all been a huge blast, and no one has paid me what I ask. They keep paying me more. So it's probably worth it. And just having a sounding board can help a lot of people.
It really does. It really does. And that's actually a great thing. Like, kudos to whoever provided the funding for that, because that's a valuable service for the community.
They're very kind, and it was far too much money they should not have spent. But if they have it, it's a great cause. I really
and I hope some people get the chance to take you up on that and improve their products, and just gives them kind of the motivation to keep moving forward. Yeah.
And if you would like to keep updates on that and updates on what I'm doing, the best place to reach me is Twitter, where you can find me at Drop the Die. You can also go to dropthedie.com for links to all of my stuff, and you can find me on DM's Guild at Drop the Die. You can just search Drop the Die, and it'll bring up anything that I've authored or helped lay out on the DM's Guild.
Yep. And I've got your Twitter, website, D&D5e portfolio, Twitch, and Patreon links down below.
That's so helpful. And I will leave this saying that it is almost 4 years that I've known you, despite us only speaking a handful of times. I actually messaged you for In Volo's Wake in 2016.
Ooh.
When you were helping distribute that to stores and companies that were running it as a pre-release for Storm King's Thunder.
Oh, back when I was regional coordinator. We're going to go way back.
I reached out to you as regional coordinator, and you reached out to me personally because we couldn't figure out how to get the PDF, and you just sent it to me so that I could run it from my game store.
Yeah, because you had the game store verified and all of that, and I'm like, we have, you know what? Yeah.
That was the first time we ever spoke, and I'm like, boy, that seems like it was 3 lifetimes ago at this point.
Oh my goodness, does it ever?
It's been a long 4 years.
That was like last decade, I'm pretty sure. But yeah, no, it has been. Well, from there to here, I think we've both done pretty well for ourselves. So I'm glad we both got Involo's week sorted out. I ran
Who knows
that
where we would be today?
I ran that set of adventures. I don't know how many times. Oh my god. But yeah, so next week, same time, same place, Sunday, 4 p.m. Central, I am gonna have Fenway Jones, the team DM, on the Designer's Den. If you don't know Fenway, she is an absolute joy. She has been DMing for several years now. I don't know if she just turned 17 or if she's still 16. Anyways, regardless though, she's started this charity as well called Jasper's Game Day in memorial to her friend Jasper, who committed suicide, who's one of her best friends that she did gaming with. And so we're going to talk about, her content that she's created and all of her work with Jasper's Game Day and just creating this charity that's like, it's international now. Like, and she's a teenager. She's my idol. I'm going to be Fenway when I grow up. She doesn't like when I say that.
I've been a part of Jasper's Game Day the past 2 years. I hope that they keep bringing me back to run stuff because it's a fantastic charity and they do so much work and get so little back from it other than helping people.
They don't want, they're here to help people and to, make the world a little bit a better place. And on that note too, I just want to give a shout out to an event that I am working with, not this coming weekend, but November 20th through 22nd, so that's Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. It's Wisdom Save Weekend, put on by StartPlaying.Games, and all proceeds go to Take This organization, which is a charity that is also about mental health for gamers. They actually provide mental health resources. They have psychiatrists, they have programs and everything to reach out to gamers, which is especially important in these trying times as we're all very isolated. And so 100% of all proceeds from any of those games go to it, and you can find them all on StartPlaying.Games. I've tweeted a bit about it, and I'm going to tweet about it again right after this, so the links will be fresh and everything. So tune in next week to talk to Fenway about Jasper's Game Day mental health stuff, and maybe stop by and play some games with me for Wisdom Save Weekend. Maybe JB will run one. I don't know. Who knows? We'll see. But anyways, that's going to be it for this episode of the Designer's Den. Until next time. Bye. I gotta find